Hello everybody and welcome to episode 5 of the Film Ignite podcast. For all things film and all things TV, this is the place to be. Today we discuss the 1991 action epic, once again directed by the legendary James Cameron, Terminator 2: Judgment Day. This episode will contain spoilers. Terminator 2 is the legendary and very well-beloved sequel to the original Terminator released in 1984. Many people consider Terminator 2 to be better than the original Terminator. Some say it's the best Terminator movie, and some people think it's one of the greatest sequels of all time. The story of T2 is essentially a continuation of the original Terminator. It is now 10 years after the events of the first film. Now I want to preface by saying that I believe I watched the ultimate cut of this movie. I looked around online and noticed there were many different versions of T2, and I was not sure which one I'd actually watched. The version I watched was 2 hours and 35 minutes, an additional 16 minutes from the theatrical cut, with additional scenes. The overall story remains the same, however. I think one thing that really surprised me about T2 is how similar it felt to the original. I had never actually sat down and watched the movie from beginning to end before, but I had seen various parts on TV or clips on YouTube. The opening scene is a T-800 spawning in, then similar to the first scene in the original where he beats up the teenagers and takes their clothes, he does the same to a biker gang in a bar. This time, there's a bit of a comedic undertone to it, as Arnold takes the guy's glasses and rides off in a motorcycle. It is still badass and very well done, but does not have the same horror or fear as the original did. Then, another Terminator spawns, and it's the T-1000 played by Robert Patrick, and my god, he is fantastic in this movie. Given the twist that occurs within the first 30 minutes, it's amazing how this actor was able to throw everyone off. When you watch the first time, it just seems like another Kyle coming to save John Connor from the Terminator. But when he tracks down John in the arcade, you think the T-800 is about to shoot John, but he shoots right by him and goes for the T-1000 instead. This is when you know you're in for a ride. This was the crazy twist I'd already known about this movie, given it's been so long since release. I wonder how people back then must have reacted to this twist, because it is executed brilliantly. Because the first 30 minutes or so of the movie is spent building anticipation that the Terminator is getting closer and closer to John, and you think the guy who's in the police outfit will come and save John Connor just like Kyle saved Sarah. But in reality, it's actually the opposite, and that's why Robert Patrick's performance is so special, because for those first 30 minutes, you can see in his eyes, he's angry, he's honed in, he's like an animal, and you think it's because he is ready and determined to save John Connor. But looking at his performance through the lens of a killer, just like the T-800 in the last movie, it makes it so much more terrifying. So the reason the T-800 was sent to protect John in the first place is that since Sarah survived the original termination attempt, apparently they sent another attempt to kill John when he was still a kid. This detail is very quickly glossed over in the opening narration by Sarah, and I didn't really like it at first, because if this really was the case, then why was it never mentioned in the original? Like, why didn't Kyle tell Sarah, this is going to happen again when John is born, so always stay alert, always be on your feet? Something like, yeah, Sarah, maybe don't get yourself locked up in a mental asylum and leave your son in danger, or anything like that. I guess it could be a fair point to be made that maybe Kyle never even knew about the second attempt, but to me, off the bat, it felt like kind of a lame way to set up the entire reason that this movie even takes place. The first attempt to kill Sarah failed, now we target John when he's a kid. My only question is, how would they even know if the first attempt failed? Would they have sent someone anyway just to make sure John Connor is dead? And what if Sarah was killed in the first movie? The machines from the future wouldn't know that. They would just hope their past selves who will be created will no longer face the rise of John Connor stopping the machines. So what is the criteria for another Terminator to get sent back when the target is a kid, if they never even knew if the target was killed or not to begin with? I can accept this plot point to save the story and actually have a reason for the Terminator to return, and what does make up for it is the fact that John Connor is the one that sends the T-800 back to save himself. And since John as a kid has the T-1000 come after him and is saved by the T-800 as a kid, then he knows that when he's an adult that he must send the T-800 back to save himself. So it is an infinite loop that cannot be broken. My only question is, how did the machines know to send the T-1000 back to kill John as a kid, as they would have no way of knowing that the original termination attempt was not successful? Man, these paradoxes are getting a little too crazy. Anyways, it seems like a few years after John was born, Sarah was trying to destroy the headquarters of a computer company and ended up being arrested and thrown in a mental asylum for believing that the world was going to end and be destroyed by machines. Now, this all makes sense, but I do feel like the movie spends way too much time in the mental mental hospital. Now, like I said before, I was watching an extended cut of the movie, but I still gotta talk about the scenes that I felt were kind of unnecessary to the movie overall. We really did not need more than 5 minutes with Sarah in the hospital, once to introduce us to her again, and another where she watches the videotape of her screaming, which is a fantastic scene, by the way. This version of the movie spends way too much time in the hospital, dealing with how tragic and messed up Sarah's life is, with these idiot doctors and creepy dudes who come in and just assault her to make her take her medication. It is also off-putting and doesn't feel like it needs to be here at all. It really just serves as an obstacle between Sarah and John. I like the idea of her being held in the hospital, just we really did not need that much time there. Plus, we get the vision scenes where it seems like Sarah is trying to save a bunch of children from dying in the blast. And in a literal sense, it makes absolutely no sense. She's screaming at them as if they have a chance to escape, like it's not a nuke that will obliterate the entire world. As it happened again throughout the movie, I realized it was more a symbolic representation of how nobody listened to Sarah and how she's screaming so loud, but nobody is listening to her about the end of the world. To be fair, I don't mind those scenes in hindsight, as well as the flashback with Kyle. I thought it was a nice nod to the original, but damn, did she really need to run down that hallway for an entire minute? Anyways, like I said, the T-800 saves John Connor in a spectacular chase scene, easily one of the best I've ever seen. The entire chase is fantastic, from the arcade all the way to the sewer type thing, where the truck comes barreling down and crashes over fences and stone just to get to John. One of my favorite parts of the entire movie is when the T-1000 crashes the truck off the ramp and the entire roof of the car gets destroyed. Then he just tears away the windshield in front of him to get a better view of John. It is such a badass moment. I gotta say that Arnold has his badass moments in Terminator 1, but Robert Patrick steals the show in terms of badass moments in Terminator 2. Another reason his character is so great is because how he is essentially playing the role that Arnold played in the last movie. He gets all the brutal and bloody kills. The scene with the foster parents is amazing, with the dad getting a blade right through the mouth, and the scene with the officer getting coffee stabbed right through the eye, with some fantastic practical effects, made for some brutal moments and kills. We also got Edward Furlong playing John Connor in this movie. I kinda wanna say he annoys me a little bit. For some reason, all of his lines seem to be so much louder than everyone else's. I don't know if it's just me, but all of his lines sound dubbed on for some reason. I'm not sure why. He is a kid at the end of the day, and to be fair, his acting is pretty good. He doesn't overact like a lot of child actors do. He's very chill and natural with his lines, but his voice is kind of squeaky and annoying, and he's always screaming every 5 seconds. That, coupled with the fact that his voice always sounds so loud and he's always talking, just makes him kind of annoying in some parts. Overall, it was a good casting choice, and his and Arnold's chemistry is great, and I'm gonna cut him some slack because he's a kid and he does a great job, but just like any kid, they annoy you sometimes. Another character introduced in this movie is Miles Dyson, the creator of Skynet, who, after the events of the first movie, discovered in the rubble that was created after Sarah crushed the first Terminator that he could study the pieces and create new artificial intelligence. I talked about this when I discussed the original, but it's so amazing to me how they made that part of the story, because it fits in with the entire time loop paradox thing. The fact that the Terminator being sent back, failing his mission and getting killed, leads to the creation of Terminators for the future. It's wild. John, Sarah, and the T-800 go on a mission to find Miles and destroy Skynet so no war ever happens in the future. Now, this is an interesting approach because in the first film, it was a fight for survival. That Sarah is the chosen one to raise the man who will lead the humans in the fight against the machines. But in T2, the perspective has changed, that the entire war can be prevented if the technology is all destroyed before it becomes sentient in the future. I don't think this contradicts anything said or shown in Terminator 1, and honestly, I wouldn't be able to wrap my head around it if it did. So, this idea I can totally buy into and appreciate. They are essentially breaking the time loop, just like they say in the movie. They are changing the future, rather than letting it play out as it should happen. With John leading, they would rather put an end to it entirely, which I think makes the most sense. So, given that by the end of the film they were successful in destroying Skynet, this means that in John's future, he will never be the future leader of any war, and he will live a normal life as a politician. Now, that right there means that as soon as they decided to destroy Skynet, that they created an alternate timeline and broke free from the closed time loop, and there is now the present timeline, where John Connor will never fight in any war, and the future timeline, where the war is still raging, but for that future John, that war will never end. Because if you think about it, there has to be another John Connor out there. The T-800 says that he was sent back to 1995 by John Connor, and by the end of the movie, he dies in the past with a John Connor who will never grow up to send a Terminator to save himself. So, the John Connor that sent the T-800 has to exist in another timeline still. I never looked that deep into the timeline and time travel aspect of the Terminator movies because surface level, that's rarely what they're about. Time travel ideas and theories are rarely mentioned within the movies themselves. They focus more on the story at hand. This movie also tries to give an emotional connection between John and the Terminator, and I find that the time travel aspects make this relationship so much better, knowing it was John that sent the T-800 to save himself. There were some pretty funny moments between the two, and I genuinely cared about the relationship. I think this movie missed its opportunity for a lot more badass killings or action scenes though. Because for some reason, John Connor doesn't want the Terminator to kill anyone. That is also a running theme throughout the movie, is what makes us man and what separates man from machine. And at the end of the day, it's emotions and feelings. And John knows that the killing of others hurts people, but the Terminator is not capable of seeing that. I appreciate the message and theme, and I think it all works well for emotional payoff, especially at the end. But there's an entire scene where the T-800 is about to go wreck house, and John tells him, "You swore, you promised not to kill anybody." And the T-800 looks back and says something like, "Don't worry," and I don't think the filmmakers understand how frustrating that was, to see Arnold standing out of a broken glass window, holding a minigun, ready to spray down about 50 cops in a helicopter, but he only goes to shoot the cars. Now don't get me wrong, I freaking love this scene. The way the music is used is fantastic, and the practical effects are amazing. But just imagine how much better it could have been if Arnold could have been blasting all those guys away instead of aiming for their kneecaps. Now, maybe I'm just being picky, but I feel like that's why they opted for the T-1000 to get all the brutal and gory kills, because Arnold's mission in this movie was to feel something by the end and understand human emotion and why humans cry and all that stuff. I get it, I respect it. I just would have had more room for brutal action in my opinion. Speaking of which, all the action scenes in this movie are freaking phenomenal. They save them for big moments and they are used sparingly and spread out throughout the long runtime in this movie, and when they hit hard. The bike chase from the first act, the hospital escape from Act 2, and the final act finale, which felt like it lasted about 30 minutes, from the time they start infiltrating Skynet to the fantastic liquid nitrogen truck chase, which leads to the steel factory fight scene. Yeah, to me it felt like the entire grand finale lasted like 30 minutes, plus I was watching the extended cut, but all the action in this movie is pure blockbuster spectacle. The pacing overall of this movie is fine. There are a few moments where it does slow down, especially near the middle. A lot of this has to do with the fact that I was so surprised by the direction this movie took. I said before that I was surprised how close this movie was to the original, and I mean that in the sense of most sequels usually try to take things to the next level and outdo themselves with the story and characters and all that. Terminator 2 does things so differently, where it feels like John and Sarah are constantly being haunted on the run, just like in Terminator 1, and the T-1000 is constantly going around blowing people away. There is no story arc or moments that felt out of place. It was not trying to expand the world they created in the first movie, but rather just continue the story sometime in the future. We barely get any new characters, and the focus of the movie is still John Connor and Sarah Connor, just like the first movie. I appreciate that the story was scaled down and simplified to the lengths of the original, and everything else was amped up to 100. The spectacle of this movie is insane, and it looks visually stunning. Every shot pops with color in the final act, and the scenes in the hospital are all lit fantastically with dark, spooky corners, and the blue tint on majority of the film looks gorgeous as well. The big explosions pop with color, and all the action scenes are filmed with practical effects, stunt doubles, and they took big risks. This movie looks so crisp and clean compared to the full screen and gritty original movie, where this movie has traditional widescreen and looks so crisp and slick. I really love the look of this movie, and the sound design is fantastic as well. The sounds of the metal of the T-1000 oozing around and morphing into different materials is fantastic. The sound of the T-800's grenades popping in his launcher is also great. Just an overall really great sound mix to accompany the fantastic visual quality. I also can't talk about this movie without talking about the fantastic soundtrack. Brad Fiedel is back to score this movie. He's the person who scored the original, and the score in this movie is so haunting. One of my favorite parts of the score is every time the T-1000 is on the screen, there's like this demented, haunted siren playing, and it is such a good score. It amps up the action sequences to 100. It makes the intensity there. It brings the thrills. It brings the horror. It's a fantastic score all around. Even better than the original in my opinion. Overall, I'm at a loss for words when choosing which film I like better of the two. They're both fantastic films with very minimal flaws in my eyes. The first opts for a darker, grittier, scarier, and more self-contained sci-fi thriller, while the second remains a sci-fi thriller but amps up the action. We travel around the city on bikes, cars, and trucks. The explosions are bigger, the threats are badder, and all the technicalities of the film have been increased significantly. If I had to choose, I would probably pick Terminator 2 just because of how it added on to what made the first one so great while going a slightly different direction and focusing more on the action rather than the horror, while still having Robert Patrick give a menacing performance to keep the tension high. Terminator 1 and 2 definitely deserve their titles as all-time classics, and I feel confident in saying that Terminator 1 is a sci-fi masterpiece and Terminator 2 is an action thriller masterpiece. Those are all my thoughts and analysis on Terminator 2 Judgment Day. The Film Ignite podcast is meant to ignite discussion on all things film and TV, so I want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on Terminator 2? And which do you prefer, the original or the sequel? Let me know. As always, thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you all in the next episode.
Hasta la vista, baby.